Okay, I can see that we are reaching a kind of a critical mass for attendees. So let's get started straight away. Thank you all for being here today, for taking the time to dive into AI in contract review, what works and how to get started. I'm joined here today by Thomas Berg from Deloitte Legal. And our goal for today is to kind of give you a general introduction on leveraging artificial intelligence, generative AI in the process of AI and contract review. The agenda for today, as you can see, is we're going to just first of all provide a quick lay of the land. So we're going to talk about what the technology is, how it works, what it does, how to leverage it in the best possible way. Then we're going to take a quick look at purpose-built tools. So you all know ChatGPT, or you probably wouldn't be here today if you didn't. You know tools like ChatGPT, like Claude and things like that. You know that there are a lot of purpose-built tools for AI contract reviewing, like, for example, Clausebase's own Clause Buddy. We'll talk about how those differ and how those tools tend to differentiate each other from differentiate themselves from each other. Then we'll also talk a little bit about compliance concerns, the typical questions that Clausebase, as a vendor of an AI review tool, typically receives, and that you as an organization, if you're looking to leverage these tools, should also be asking yourself. And then finally, we'll also have a little bit of time before we wrap up after 1 hour or so. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. My name is Senna. I'm one of the co-founders of Clausebase. My current kind of job positioning is a little bit around the marketing and customer success front. So I help our clients to implement the software and to gain value as much as possible from it. Maybe Tom, you could also do a quick introduction.
Yes, very happy to do so. So hi everyone, I am Thomas Preuve. I am a senior manager within Deloitte Legal, and more specifically Legal Operate. So we handle the day-to-day topics around people, process, and technology, of which AI is currently a very hot topic. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm more than happy to be here present in this webinar.
Wonderful. Well, with all of that being said, let's get started straight away. Now, before we dive too deeply into today's topic, let's first delineate a little bit what we are talking about, because there are two things that you can think of when you hear the words contract reviewing. And the first one is individual contract redlining. So imagine you are a lawyer, you receive a document from a counterparty, probably in the context of a negotiation, and you start marking it up. You start flagging unacceptable provisions, adding new provisions, tweaking existing provisions, the typical kind of like track changes work that you do inside Microsoft Word, that kind of thing. The second is bulk contract reviewing of contracts that have already been concluded. And that's the sort of thing that you typically do in the context of an M&A due diligence process, where you don't receive an individual document from an individual counterparty, you receive a data room full of contracts that have already been concluded, and then you have to start searching for potential skeletons in the closet for those contracts. In this webinar, we are going to focus solely on individual contract redlining. And this is mostly because M&A due diligence and just bulk contract review in general is really a niche application of AI review technology. Comes with a range of different considerations, which honestly we don't have time to cover today. Tom, I think you can probably you probably have the same sentiment on how those things differ. And actually, you have already experimented with M&A due diligence review technology, right?
Yes, that's definitely correct, and for definitely the reasons you just mentioned, being on the one hand the volume, it's a really way bigger volume that are of contracts that are being reviewed in terms of a due diligence process, certainly during the M&A transactions. So that is one of the key differentiators. The second one is also the output and the format. So these contracts have already been signed, so there's not much adapting, or there's no way to adapt what is already there. So the focus is also much more on reporting. So on the one hand, analyzing the bulk of information and then fine-tuning it into a decent report where you can come to conclusions which are of relevance for the follow-up of the transaction to include in your SPA and so on. So definitely very much other use cases at which we are also currently experimenting within Deloitte Legal.
Yeah. Okay, terrific. So moving on, what does it look like, AI reviewing? So is AI-powered contract reviewing as simple as just uploading a document to a tool like ChatGPT and asking it for a review as you're seeing on the screen right now? In short, yes, it can be that easy. But if you've given this a shot, and I imagine that many of you have, just with a basic document, you'll probably have found that this doesn't really work all that well, or that that it misses important things. We're going to look at some of the biggest challenges now, first of all, that this kind of out-of-the-box AI reviewing has. This sort of very generic, very basic, upload your document to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and just see what it has to say about it. We'll talk a little bit about some of the typical challenges that we see there. And obviously, the first challenge is the AI cannot read your mind. So just asking for a general review, like you saw in the video before, like, please OpenAI, please ChatGPT, review this document for me, let me know what's wrong with it or what I should do with it, leaves far too much up to the LLM's discretion, up to its imagination, really. And as a rule of thumb, the more detailed your prompt, the better your results are going to be, or at the very least, the more in line with your expectations the results are going to be. And that's what you can see that's happening here. So we have a little bit of a tweaked version of the video that we just looked at. Instead of just asking for a general review, we provide this kind of bulleted list of the things that we want the AI to check for. And that gives us a much cleaner overview on those topics that are important to me. It's entirely possible that the AI finds these topics on its own, when you just ask for a general review, but it's super unpredictable because, as you probably also have already seen, if you ask an AI the same question 2 times, it's likely going to give you a different answer each time, because it basically kind of guesses the one word after the other. There is no guaranteed consistency, no guaranteed predictability between these 2 different prompts. Of course, if you have a bulleted list like that, that unpredictability goes down significantly. As you can see, basically from the video that we just looked at, right, we already get a little bit better results, or at the very least, we're getting results that are a little bit more in line with what we want to know about this document. Tom, I think you recently also participated in a webinar where you had a similar kind of analysis, right?
Yeah, indeed. So a couple of weeks ago, we hosted a seminar on the use of AI in a legal context. It was in collaboration with the of Belgium company lawyers. So quite an interesting audience also there present. And interestingly, about 80% of the attendees had already experimented with the free tools, the free AI tools for legal document review or other legal tasks. And they're also in like 80% of the cases, the general consensus was indeed that results were not satisfying, at least not on the spot. What they also identified is what you came to say is, on the one hand, the inconsistency in the responses. So you can ask the same question 2 or 3 times and you can get different answers 2 or 3 times. So that is definitely something a lawyer doesn't like, for good reasons, by the way. And the same applies to the generalized output. So they all said, yeah, it gives some output, but it is way too general to actually do something with it. It doesn't really add enough value to start using it or to start leveraging it into our day-to-day practice. And as a result hereof, unfortunately, they just said, we'll stop using it. We just stick to the old school way of reviewing and drafting all those documents ourselves and just basically ignore the presence or the value AI can add when used appropriately with the right techniques to gain some better results.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. That's an experience that we have seen as well, where that initial experience is a little bit soured, or you know, there's people sour on that initial experience, and then they just kind of give up, and that's unfortunate because there is a lot of promise if you know how to use it correctly, which of course we'll go into further detail on later. But a lot of lawyers don't even get to that stage. A lot of them just write off the technology entirely for compliance concerns. So essentially, the fear, which is, by the way, completely valid. I will say that up front, but the fear surrounding confidentiality, regulatory provisions, and things like that. You know, there. We all know that from early on, these tools often communicated also explicitly, you know, that they would be using the data that you implement into the tool that you insert, that they would be using that to further train, and so that you know, confidentiality is a serious potential issue there. We've done some research on this topic. We'll also go a little bit further into detail on that. But what you can already see here is that different companies deal with this problem in different ways. There is a trend, though. If you've probably all heard the saying, if the product is free, you are the product. And honestly, that seems to be what's happening here too. Like I said, we'll come back to this when we address compliance in a little bit further detail later on. But this general summary that you're already looking at is quite accurate for most commercial LLMs, commercial AI tools. If you use the free version of the tool, chances are that your data is being reused. If you use the paid or the API version, which means that, you know, you use a version of the LLM as implemented into a different tool, like for example our Clause Buddy. If you use the AI in Clause Buddy, you're essentially using, you know, one of these models, depending on which one that you choose, as implemented into Clause Buddy. If you use the API or the paid version, your data is not being reused. Of course, it's always best to check the terms of service, but like I said, there is definitely a trend here. Maybe quick question, Tom, to you. How does Deloitte deal with this these compliance concerns?
So how do we deal with that? That's a very good question. Within Deloitte, at least within Deloitte Belgium, since March of this year, we don't have access anymore to ChatGPT or any other equivalents. For the professional purposes, we are allowed to use AI, but only using our own chatbot. It's called Paired. It is something that is built by Deloitte and hosted on Deloitte certified environments, and they are really subject to really strict set of controls and guardrails and so on. So within that protected environment, we are allowed to use it, but as indicated, yeah, just the regular versions you just came to mention, we cannot use them anymore for obvious Deloitte reasons.
Yeah. And that's something that, yeah, we do see in many different kinds of organizations which have the sort of compliance concerns of the scale that Deloitte has them. But again, that's something that we also look into a little bit further later on. Another challenge with this typical sort of ChatGPT style of just getting an AI review is that it gives you a list of things to do, or a list of potential issues that you may want to take a look at, but there's no real follow-up here. You still need to manually make these changes. ChatGPT cannot edit a document for you, or maybe better put, it cannot make kind of the surgical amendments to a document itself within the document, within the Word document, and leave like the style, the formatting, the layout, the terminology, and things like that. Leave all of that intact. That's kind of something that you will then still have to do manually. And a final main challenge when it comes to just leveraging the general AI models for AI-powered reviewing is that there are certain data limitations, or in the way that I like to phrase it is that there's a difference between commercial review of a document and legal review of a document. And the out of the box, off the shelf AI tools are a little bit better in commercial than they are in legal reviews. And actually, legal reviews in general, even for purpose-built tools, is still a tricky area. LLMs are really good at gauging commercial issues like, which is the favorite party, or how to change a clause to favor a different party. It can visualize different negotiation options, all of those different things, but it cannot do, or it cannot help you on those topics that it just hadn't been trained on. And that's typically the kind of stuff that is either behind paywalls or just not in on the publicly available internet in general, right? Which is, of course, where these LLMs were trained. Especially for legal review, this is a challenge. Sure, legislation is by definition public. Case law in most jurisdictions is to some extent or other public. I know for us, Tom, right, in Belgium, it's still pretty big issue. Public isn't quite the word I would give to it. And then, of course, legal doctrine, which admittedly in civil law jurisdictions is a little bit more important maybe than in commercial law jurisdictions, but a lot of legal doctrine that sort of interprets statutory provisions, case law, a lot of that is hidden behind publisher paywalls, and that's just data that a lot of the LLMs haven't been able to use. Even in the commercial space, sometimes you'll find that certain kind of tips and tricks that you learn on the job, or getting the sort of sense of what's market in a specific sector or jurisdiction, what sort of liability limitation cap applies to a commercial agreement of type X in the Belgian chemistry sector, or something along those lines, right? Those are things that you have a really hard time, or even AI has a really hard time of defining. That's typically something that lawyers with a lot of experience, who have kind of been around the block, are in a lot better position to accurately estimate, if only because, again, the AI doesn't really have access to that kind of information. That's not information that's available on the public internet, unless people have done a public research or public review of those kinds of topics, but that's fairly limited. So you can use it for finding commercial issues, finding legal issues, or answering legal questions is a little bit trickier. That basically covers the challenges that we typically see with just leveraging off-the-shelf ChatGPT style tools for basic document review. Now we'll take a quick look at the different kinds of purpose-built tools, right, and how they differentiate themselves from a ChatGPT or similar, and also how they differentiate themselves from similar tools in their space. Because, like I said, right at the start of the presentation, our own Clause Buddy is a purpose-built AI reviewing tool, but we definitely weren't the only legal tech vendors who saw the obvious potential of this kind of technology. In fact, Legal Technology Hub, which is one of the largest directories of legal tech products on the market, reported about 82 solutions when we did this research initially. It might already be more, especially if you're viewing the recording of this webinar later on. In all honesty, it's never been this easy to build a contract reviewing tool, and so it's no wonder that so many new players are entering the market. How do you make sense of such a fragmented landscape, and are there even that many differences between these kinds of tools? That's what we'll be taking a look at right now. So it's impossible for us, I will say that up front, to do a full comparison of how these tools differ from one another. But what we can show is how they differentiate from themselves, how they differentiate from generic AI tools. Now, fair warning, before we launch into this part of the presentation, we are going to show all of these differentiation mechanisms from the viewpoint of our own Clause Buddy. So most of what you're going to see now is just slight recordings of Clause Buddy itself, for the very simple reason that we don't have access to the tools of our competitors. But I want to say, in the interest of transparency, that a lot of the features you are about to see are not exclusive to Clause Buddy in any way. If you'd like to get a kind of in-depth comparison, we're happy to sit down with you together and provide some more information on that, but we just don't have the time to go through that today. So let's start with the first choice that developers have to make when they're building AI reviewing tools, and that is, where do you make it live, right? ChatGPT, Claude, DeepSeek, whatever sort of general chat interface, large language model that you use, they all made their choice, and that is they live in a web browser. In a web-based setup, you just upload a document to a web platform where the review can be performed. The benefit of that approach is that for the vendors that build these purpose-built AI reviewing tools, they have a lot of flexibility in how they built their tool, what options that they provide. They can tweak the interface pretty much as they like, which is not the case if you're using a Word add-in. That's the second style of AI reviewing tool that you can use. The benefit here is that you basically have the AI reviewing directly in the environment where lawyers do their individual contract redlining. And so that allows for seamless interaction with the documents themselves. Of course, you're also limited to the fact that you're also limited just to using Word, although in our experience, not a lot of lawyers use tools like Google Docs. But also you're limited to what Word allows you to do within its own sort of ecosystem. When we built our own reviewing tool, when we built FlawsBuddy, we deliberately chose a Word add-in approach, by which I mean, I don't mean to say that it's definitely 100% the better option. We did, however, build a web tool for legal drafting when we initially started out. Not for AI-powered reviewing, especially not in the style that we know today, but when we got our first start in 2019, we did want to kind of help lawyers move away from Word and specifically the limitations. And we had to learn over time that, you know, the added functionality that you can build into a web browser tool just does not weigh up against the sheer ease of use that a Word add-in offers, which for us meant that adoption was just much easier. Right? If you live in the environment that lawyers are already accustomed to, you're going to get a lot more use out of the tool. But I do know that Deloitte has a little bit of a different approach to this, right, Tom? I mean, you guys do a little bit more with web browser technology as well. You're still on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Had trouble finding the unmute button. That's a rookie mistake. No, we use a hybrid approach. So on the one hand, we do have tools that are also within Word. So the Word add-in that you just explained for drafting and review, for example, that is definitely something we also use, not only due to the fact that it is also within the comfort zone of the lawyers. So it is definitely something that helps for the adoption process and the structural use hereof. Next to that, we also have other AI leverage tools which are exclusively web-based. We're talking, for example, about Documenter. It's an in-house developed tool, which does not come with an add-in functionality, but that is due to the nature of the tool itself. It is a tool that helps to analyze or review also bulk documents, but not only limited to Word, also to PDF, PowerPoint, Excel, images, etc. You can all upload them at once and have them reviewed, and that doesn't necessarily make sense to do it from within Word. On the one hand, from within a Word add-in. On the other hand, it's also the user experience that might be easier if you just go to a link where you can upload those documents. It might be quicker and more efficient than having to do it via the Outlook store. You have to download an add-in and so on. If you only have to use it once, it is quite some red tape to deal with, to contact your IT to have it installed just for a one-off. So that is also one of the reasons why we chose specifically for Documenter to do it on web-based rather than via an add-in. But as you very correctly indicated, both of them have their pros and cons. It all depends on the use case and your personal preference. So as far as we are concerned, there is no one way to go. Both of them have, as said, their relevance and use cases.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So with that said, there is a second choice that vendors of purpose-built AI reviewing tools have to make when they approach the AI reviewing, and that is whether to approach it from a open-ended or a closed perspective. We already looked at this earlier when we showed the difference, right, between just asking ChatGPT, review this document for me and flag any problematic provisions. That's very open. That's where you basically let the AI choose what issues it wants to check for, what issues it wants to flag. And we also looked at providing a bullet list of things that you want the AI to check for. That's a more closed approach. In a closed approach, which you can now see in this video on the left, you basically guide the LLM through the review process, right? So here you can see inside of Clause Buddy, you can have this sort of playbook or a checklist of requirements that you want the AI to check for. This is inside of a Microsoft Word document. So the AI then reads the document and just cross-references it with those requirements. And then when it's done, it provides a breakdown. In Clause Buddy's case, it's kind of red flag, green flag analysis of whether your requirements were met and an analysis of why they were or were not met. So it's very consistent, it's very repeatable, it's very predictable on what the AI is going to go through for you. That's what you can see here on the left-hand side. Now we also, of course, have the sort of open-ended approach, which is what you're seeing on the right-hand side, which is playing right now. There you, like I said, you give the reins to the AI. The AI doesn't have to check for explicit issues. A general kind of sense check of the document is sufficient. That is quick and easy. That's particularly useful if you did most of the work already and just want to kind of sparring partner to check if you missed anything. Like Tom already said, also on which where you want tools to live. Both approaches have their merits. We in Clause Buddy have also decided to accommodate both for that reason. However, we should say that we initially only started with a closed approach. We find personally that the best results are achieved with closed review systems, or better put, adoption is typically quicker with this sort of in Clause Buddy, it's called the doc chat. It basically allows you to just ask open-ended questions on the document that you have open on in Word. Adoption is typically quicker, but that initial enthusiasm often fades for the very same reason as with general AI tools. It also fades, and that's because the AI behaves unexpectedly, it misses key issues, or just to be more general about it, it cannot read your mind. And that is something that a lot of lawyers do find a little bit frustrating, is that it doesn't pick up on things that you would think are obvious to pick up on. Tom, does that kind of match your experiences? What's your preferred take here?
Yeah, definitely. So what you said on the open-ended review, for us, it's all about managing expectations. When people hear AI, they are expecting magic. They're like, we don't have to put too much effort in there. Just a simple prompt will give great results. That is not the case. Since it's not the case, they will be disappointed and they will stop using it for the wrong reasons. So that's about managing expectations, and what we also use to really, how do you say it, and encourage people to nonetheless use the open-ended review, since it's quick and easy to do, but with the right expectations being just do it by way of a sanity check. Don't expect that it will be a full-blown legal analysis of the document. It's a sanity check. It will look for inconsistencies, typos, missing definitions, and in best case, it will identify some legal issues. But again, don't expect that it will flag it all and it will do the deep analysis of that document. So with that in mind, we have created a good habit within Deloitte Legal. After having finalized a document legally, you just pull it through an AI with a simple prompt to do a sanity check, and whatever comes out of there can still be used to tweak the document if needed. It's just 1 minute that it takes to do that sanity check. And as said, in best case, you have some tweaking, you can finalize the document. But again, if that's the expectation, people will be happy. And in that sense, also open-ended AI reviewing has its added value. So that is definitely something we do. With regards to close review, we will get back to that one during the remainder of this session.
Absolutely. So that's another choice that, like I said, purpose-built AI tools have to make. If we zoom in a little bit further on, indeed, that sort of closed approach, right? The number one issue with that is that it takes time to set up. That may sound strange because we saw earlier on at the very start of the presentation, we saw a bulleted list of 3 issues. It doesn't take, I mean, you could extrapolate that to 30 issues, but it doesn't take that long to kind of write down the reflexes that you as a lawyer already have, the checks that you would manually perform in any case if you are reviewing a commercial contract. It shouldn't take that much time. But the problem is that everything that you have to do around that, right? Lawyers work typically in teams, so they have to navigate different viewpoints on which issues are important. They have to align everyone on what is important. We find that especially in-house legal teams that have a sort of solid knowledge manager, or even if someone doesn't have that official title, someone who kind of takes ownership of building out the knowledge a little bit, writing all of that stuff out. They often have done this exercise already. They did it before ChatGPT was even a thing. But for other teams, getting to a playbook is usually a pretty difficult challenge. And that's why a lot of AI vendors like ourselves will offer ways to speed up that process. And a first way to speed up that process is to offer prefabricated playbooks, which you're seeing right here on the screen, right? In Clause Buddy, you have the option to download playbook templates. These are, contain several default issues for the AI to check on based on specific contract types. Honestly, this is useful at first, but inevitably you will want to be able to tweak the playbook to make it fit your preferences. Not a problem if the vendor allows such tweaking. As you can see also here inside of the playbook, you can make manual adjustments here inside of this sort of general editing menu, but not all of them do. I will also shout out here specifically Screens AI, which is another AI reviewing vendor. They also have a concept of a marketplace of playbooks, so that people can create playbooks, offer them for sale on a central marketplace, and the people who needs to have these AI reviews performed, they can then buy these playbooks. In that setup, you have a kind of dual-sided marketplace, a win-win scenario. It's very useful to get to a playbook that was really vetted by a human, but again, it suffers from the same limitations in the sense that the AI, or rather the creator of the prefabricated playbook, be they a company or an individual lawyer, they cannot possibly know every issue that is important to the user of that playbook. They can't read your mind just like the AI can't read your mind. So some manual tweaking is always going to be required. And I understood this is a service, right? Playbook creation that you offer for your clients?
Indeed, the traditional approach is something we facilitate. And with the traditional approach, we mean really drafting a playbook from scratch, old school way, within Word, within Excel, with colors, with the topic, the importance, the model clause, the fallbacks, the explanations, and so on and so on. So really, the way we did it for the past 50 years, probably, that is something we still do since lawyers love doing the way they're doing their job for the past century, or have been doing that job for the past century. So obviously, we still do that. And again, we also want to emphasize that having a playbook in place is definitely a real good starting position to integrate it within an AI solution. If you have that playbook, as said, you can easily integrate it in that solution. So it seems quite straightforward and quite easy, like just kicking up an open door. So we might be wondering, okay, why are we not there yet? So what is stopping us? And we already asked it also at the same legal counsels, the company lawyers during that event, okay, what is actually stopping you if you would have a playbook and you have the AI at your fingertips, which is the case currently, what's stopping you from really leveraging that playbook and start you leveraging it by way of AI? There, the feedback was, on the one hand, the initial time investment. They're saying, okay, creating a playbook will take a lot of time. Okay, that's true, but you will definitely return the investment done in creating that playbook for sure. It will lead to improved accuracy. It will lead to much more consistency. It will lead to more productivity and so on. So that is not necessarily the right reason not to start doing it. I understand it comes on top of their day-to-day work, so that makes it really difficult to cope next to all the other urgencies they have to handle. So, okay, it's a good reason, but not inevitable to do something about it. Next to that, there's also the expectations where they say, okay, we want the playbook to be 100% compliant with every scenario that might happen. Again, we are lawyers, they are lawyers. We're never going to achieve something that is 100% fit to our own expectations or to any scenario that might pop up. So that is really something we have to get away from and not aim for that 100%. The aim of AI is not being able to replace a human by 100%. That's not the aim, that's not the goal, and that will probably never happen. It's really complementing the human expertise on the one hand and making it much more efficient on the other hand. So even if we take, for example, a semi-realistic expectation of 50%, let's say whatever the AI bot does based on the playbook will have an efficiency increase of 50%. That means that 50% of the job is already done. It means that you still have to do the other 50%, but again, the 50%, the first 50% has already been done by an AI, leveraged by AI. So that is already half of the job that has been done. Again, it's not 100%. It's not necessarily what we expect, but nonetheless, again, I want to really emphasize 50%, 60, 70 is a huge increase in productivity.
Another way to approach it is that you basically have AI generated playbooks, right? The idea is very enticing. In this scenario, you kind of upload your standard template of a certain type of document to the AI, and you ask it to derive the rules the requirements that you have from that document. And again, we have to emphasize the AI cannot read your mind. And at the very least, you'll again need to do a little bit of tweaking and fine tuning. For example, the AI doesn't know, which issues are important to you. I've seen situations with clients of ours where they say, for us, it's really important that this one word makes it into the definition of authorized representatives of NDAs, for example, or post 2020, lawyers want to make sure that pandemic is included in the list of force majeure events, right? Those different kinds of things are things that the AI may not always be able to pick up on, or it may not be able to accurately gauge whether that's important for you. So honestly, to sum it up, which is better, prefabricated playbooks or AI-generated playbooks? Honestly, we don't really have a preference on this one. Different legal teams are in different states of readiness and appetite to work on that problem. Excuse me. And so the different approaches that we see represent the varying degrees of how far along different legal teams are in knowledge management. Ultimately, though, there is still going to be a little bit of manual work requirement, and it just kind of depends on how willing and able your team is to do that. And actually, I just realized that we didn't have the video play, but as you can see here in Clause Buddy, the way that looks is you just extract some text, you ask Clause Buddy to extract the rules from that text selection, and then for better or for worse, the AI kind of makes a guess at what are the elements that are important here that we should list as requirements on what we want, in this case, royalties clauses to be and what we want them to look like. For legal teams that do invest in this kind of active knowledge management, clause library functionalities are also a way to provide some cool synergies with AI reviewing tools. And what you're seeing here in the video is that the AI can spot a certain issue in a document, so a requirement that is not met, and it can then immediately offer your team's standard clauses or fallback clauses as an alternative to the clause that doesn't fit your requirements. Or in this case, in this video, right, the requirement says that there needs to be a force majeure clause. That requirement is not met because there is no force majeure clause. So, okay, fine. The AI can offer our standard force majeure clause from our quality library clause, but it can just insert that straight away into the document. Moving on from that, most often though, or more often than not, you won't just replace a clause in a counterparty's document with yours, unless, like in the case we just saw, there is no alternative for this clause, because just throwing out a counterparty's clause and throwing yours in is just bad negotiation etiquette. And that's something that our clients have also highlighted, which is why we built the Smart Merge tool. And what you're seeing in this video, as I click play, of course, what you're seeing in this video is that a third-party clause is being, and your own library clause, are both being distilled down to their kind of key components, which then allows you to just pick and choose. I can just now see that actually we don't have the right clause being, no, there we go. So here you can see that we hit Smart Merge for this payment clause right here. And so these are being distilled down to their components, where we can then just pick and choose, which ones that we want to arrive at in a sort of harmonized clause version. And I understand, Tom, that this is also something that is pretty popular with clause-buddy users at Deloitte, right? And now I have to, of course, make sure that we. No, I can see that we've lost Tom again, which is a little bit unfortunate. Maybe we can jump back to that in a little bit, but I do realize that we are running a little bit short on time, so we're just going to continue on from here. Of course, you're not always going to have standardized clauses to fall back on. And in fact, in our experience, it's a very small minority of legal teams that have done the work to identify and collect standardized clauses and fallback positions. And if you indeed don't have these clauses, then what you can also do is you can let the AI rewrite the clause to make it fit your requirement. This is also a good kind of alternative to the challenge that we highlighted earlier, that the AI with ChatGPT style interface has no real follow-up. And that's also what you're seeing here. So in this video, which you just watched, the requirement says that indemnification has to be mutual. And the review finds that that is not the case. We have a red flag review. So what we can do is we can rewrite the selected text, which makes it so that the AI redrafts the clause to make it fit that requirement, make the clause mutual, and then insert that straight away in track changes. This, by the way, seems like an easy thing to add, but it is actually, for us, it was an incredibly complex nut to crack. I'll spare you the technical details, but it's a combination of one, Word not offering a great deal of flexibility for developers to manipulate the styling of a document by default, and two, legal documents being broken, honestly, in the legal sector. Nobody uses Word the way that Microsoft intended it to be used in the, with styles and things like that. I think if we're all being honest, lawyers don't really know how styles work, which makes it difficult for the AI to read what the style should be, because in the styles menu, we have an overview of what the styles that are available to be used, what they look like and how they are set up. But of course, lawyers don't use these styles, so the AI can get a little bit confused there. And that's a typical issue that we then have to dance around when we build in this kind of redrafting that you can see here, where the formatting, layout, negotiation, indentation and spacing and things like that, where all of that is being retained. And you'll also find that in a lot of different tools, this is just not available, and you just only have plain text copying and pasting. And to just drive home how difficult this is. Not even Microsoft's own Copilot is able to do this. Microsoft's own tool cannot play nicely with those styling rules. And you can see basically in this video the exact type of prompt that I did just now with Clause Buddy, but inside of Copilot. And this is the result that you see in Copilot. It just returns in plain text, not formatted, not in track changes in any way, the result of that clause. It could very well be that this result is still pretty good, but I have to manually check how these two clauses differ from each other. And this is also why you'll find many of these vendors not willing to invest in cracking that styling nut. It is tricky, and the results, even I will admit, even for Clause Buddy, aren't 100% perfect. You're basically having the AI guess the styling, but more often than not, it will provide a clean way to kind of insert text into the document while also retaining some of that styling layout. With the time that we have left, let's take a quick look at the common compliance concerns. So the biggest impediments that we see legal teams have in order to get started with this kind of technology. And let's start with the number one fear that we see legal teams have is the data that you input into the tool being used to train the model, or put more broadly, does the LLM have kind of lasting access to this data? It's a very valid fear to have for the very basic reason that getting quality data to train the model on is a significant challenge for basically every single LLM vendor out there. Parties like OpenAI are also engaging all sorts of content partnerships to unlock additional data that was initially behind paywalls. So using the data that their own users submit is a very good way to get to this quality data. Now, we already looked at this slide a little bit, and Kenneth, you also asked the question on, well, I use the free version of ChatGPT and actually disabled the fact that my data is being used to train the LLM. That is indeed for ChatGPT a possibility, right? You can choose to opt out of your data being used to train the model, but that is not the default setting. And in fact, the way that we look at it, OpenAI has a vested interest in building out their LLMs. It's entirely possible as this competition ramps up that they just kind of change their policy here and just say that all data will be reused for free subscriptions. For the API and paid subscriptions, this is a much bigger, much more difficult decision to make because in the API and paid versions, you're basically leveraging the technology for more enterprise-style use cases where confidentiality of that data is pretty much a required condition, and so there the LLM vendors are a little bit more hesitant to provide really, or when there the LLM vendors are basically able to provide more obvious guarantees on security and on data confidentiality. Again, if the product is free, you are the product. So we do see that sort of general trend that your data is not reused in the API and paid versions. One major exception to this is that, for example, Microsoft, if you use the Azure version of GPT, they may store your prompts for abuse monitoring. In other words, if you ask a tool like this for instructions on how to build a bomb for using your own chemicals that you have in your kitchen, that prompt may get flagged, and that may get stored for up to 30 days even, and reviewed by a human. The fact this is happening shook up the legal industry a while ago, but honestly, it shouldn't be all that surprising. This is actually standard fare for most cloud services. I think also, Tom, that's why Deloitte has their own chatbot, right, to kind of dance around that issue of the abuse monitoring.
Yeah, indeed. So maybe to also put it into perspective, Deloitte Legal is not only a law firm. Next to that, it is also part of a way bigger group of Deloitte being also an auditor. So in that sense, all the rules that are applicable for the auditor are also applicable for all the other group members within Deloitte. So hence, we are subject to much more security standards than a regular or traditional law firm would be. That said, indeed, Deloitte has its own safe environment to work in, to run in that LLM. It is subject to the Global Technology Operating Model, how it's called, and it's really an in-depth analysis of cybersecurity, how the solution has been developed, where it is hosted, how it is managed in terms of privacy, in terms of risk management, and so on and so on. So, and also a lot of guardrails that are predefined, so that also prevents users from doing wrongful prompts, or at least the results that come from a prompt are always monitored and managed also by those guardrails. So I said quite some safeguards around that, but that is due to the particular capacity we have as Deloitte law firm auditor and any other capacity we might have. So maybe overkill, but nonetheless, it does definitely do the job, and it provides enough safety to be able to leverage for professional purposes.
Okay, great. With the time that we have left, let's take a quick look at one major question that we often receive from our clients or our prospective clients, and that is, which security measures should your vendor be able to show if you are indeed if you want to have a solid answer to some of these compliance concerns. Let's go through a quick list of things that you can check for if you're interested in adopting a purpose-built AI reviewing tool. What do you check for? The first obvious thing is certification. So the most popular ones there, the most relevant ones are ISO 27001 and SOC 2. Large companies often have security questionnaires spanning hundreds of questions, which is a huge pain to fill out from a vendor's perspective. Ask me how I know, because it takes a very long time. You cannot really reuse a lot of the answers that you provide in one questionnaire, because the questions are often phrased in a different way in different questionnaires. But thanks to our ISO 27001 certification, we can usually throw out at least half of these questions by simply saying, look, see our ISO certificate. ISO, if you don't know it, is a kind of international standard for information security management systems. In short, what it does is it kind of tests us as a company on risk management practices, data protection practices, security controls, incident management, continuous improvement, all of these different kinds of things that we then get audited on, and that we can then also show to the outside world, look, this is something that we take very seriously, and we pass this kind of test, so you can kind of assume that we are responsible when it comes to data and cybersecurity. We also see a lot of vendors get SOC 2 certification. I won't go into the technical details and differences, but it's more of a US-based standard. It's slightly narrower in scope, but broadly serves the same purpose. And then secondly, another thing that you may want to take a quick look at is LLM agnostic architecture. As you probably know, generative AI moves incredibly fast. The best LLM tools today may be completely obsolete in a couple of weeks from now. So vendors that tie themselves too tightly to a single LLM provider risk leaving you behind when better options emerge. These tools, the foundational models, Claude and ChatGPT or GPT 4 or 5 even in the future, they're constantly leapfrogging each other. And having an LLM agnostic model, so not tied to a specific LLM, allows for easy switching and ensures that also your workflows stay future proof. Finally, also, and in a related matter, you also want to maybe look at vendors that allow you to use your own API key. In short, let's say that you use Clause Buddy, for example. If you leverage the generative AI functionalities of Clause Buddy, what you're doing is you're leveraging our subscription to these tools, because we use them in the background. More and more legal teams are developing the kind of technical expertise to take charge of their own data infrastructure. And as we are seeing, more legal teams are setting up their own LLM subscription and basically want to be able to use their LLM subscription to power the AI functionalities of a tool like Clause Buddy. That is something that we offer, and actually that's something that a lot of different vendor offers. The benefit here is that you can track billing much more clearly, that you can ensure that certain data that you send never even hits the vendor server. It's just an additional layer of security that you can build in. But of course, your vendor has to enable the ability to use your own API key for things like drafting and reviewing. And then finally, I mentioned that abuse monitoring exception. This is pretty much the only loophole that there is to your data not being able to be seen by any third parties. You maybe want to look at finding a vendor that offers this that has achieved an abuse monitoring exception. We at Closebase, we have also achieved that exception. So we have a partnership with Microsoft where Microsoft basically says, we are not going to check the prompts that your users submit. So in theory, you could use Clause Buddy to search instructions for building a homemade bomb, and Microsoft wouldn't know. That's something that obviously is not something that you just get with a paid ChatGPT subscription or anything like that. But that covers pretty much the key issues that you want to check for when you go through a kind of vendor analysis project. Okay, I think we're running short on time here. I think we also discussed the main questions here. So I want to thank you all for being here today, for taking the time. The replay of this webinar is going to be shared. But if you have additional questions, if there are things you want to dive into a little bit further when it comes to the topic of AI-powered contract reviewing, don't hesitate to reach out to us personally. And also, don't hesitate to check out the recent blog posts that we wrote on this topic and on which this webinar is in large part based. We take a little bit more of a deep dive approach there. But yeah, like I said, you're also always welcome to reach out if you want more information. So yeah, thank you all so much, and have a great rest of the day.